reading and rereading. It's just like you do with the Bible. Getting together to discuss. It's just like with the Bible.
So you usually talk to family members about Ulysses?
Yeah, I sometimes try to, but nobody shows any interest except for a nephew. He started reading it some time ago. And yeah, he's a grown-up man, but it was nice because he studies math and he's working with programming, computer programming, and from everything I say about the book, he decided to read it in Portuguese, which is our native language.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to have influenced somebody on the family, in the family.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. So when was like the first time that you read Ulysses or Joyce's other work?
Okay, I started by reading the portraits of the artist as a young man because I had a student from a literature major course, and she needed help with English, so I studied the book to help her read it, and then for fun, the two of us, we read together Dubliners.
Wow.
And after that, well, it's interesting because the book is about a journey, and my reading of the book is a 5-year journey.
Okay.
Because the first time I read it was the original, and it was not planned to be a journey like this for me, but I think it was like the same thing for Homer's tragedy, and also the let's say tragedy of the common man, that I call it. It's the journey of the ordinary man. And I started reading it because after being married for 22, 23 years, I separated, and I thought, okay, now I'm gonna have the time to read Ulysses.
Wow.
Because when I was married, it was impossible. So I was home alone, and it was funny because I slept in a double bed. So I said, now I'm sleeping with Ulysses, and I slept with the book on the bed with me. It was funny.
That's fantastic.
And then it's a journey. It's really a journey. And then so I was sleeping with Ulysses, literally. And after a year that I divorced, I had breast cancer. And then, I had chemo for a year. Then I had to stop reading for a while because the book was too heavy to hold.
Wow.
And I was feeling very sick from the treatment. It was a very harsh treatment. And then I quit it for about a year. And then I started again. And well, all in all, it was 5 years to finish.
Wow.
And when I started getting closer to the end, I didn't want it to finish. So I kept putting the book down because I didn't want it to finish. I didn't want to finish reading it. So that's why it took me 5 years. And also because it's difficult, it's very difficult. And I bought, the version that I bought is an annotated version.
Nice.
Which didn't help me much because well, it helped me when it came to comments about politics, because I didn't know anything about the history of Ireland or its politics or anything. I studied American and British literature in college, but we didn't even get close to Joyce in college at the time. And the annotations about politics, the names of main politicians and the historic landmarks, that was very nice. But there were lots of comments that were about the complicated or unusual words from Latin, which I studied in college, and Italian. I speak Portuguese as a native language, so understanding French, French, Spanish, and Italian is not so complicated when it comes to isolated words. So sometimes I would read that, oh, there is an annotation, and I was going to read it, and it was a translation of a word that I had already understood.
Oh my goodness.
So, but it was a fantastic journey for me. It was a fantastic journey. Now I participate in the same group that Hilaria is in.
Mm-hmm.
We are reading it in Brazilian Portuguese.
Wow, that's so cool. What are the conversations like there? Maybe what's like the coolest discussion that group has had for you?
Okay, the group, we usually just read. There isn't much of a discussion in the group. I think because there are people in the group who don't speak English. Mm-hmm. And the people who don't speak Portuguese, then we don't really have a common language to discuss. But when we have only people who speak Portuguese, like last week, there were only 3 readers, and we were all Brazilian. And then we talked a little bit about, it is I don't know the names of the episodes by heart, like a lot of people do, and I envy them because I don't. It's the episode when Bloom and Stephen are together at Bloom's home. It's towards the end. I also read the Odyssey after I finished reading Ulysses. I read the Odyssey. I didn't read it before because I didn't want to be influenced. My college training was always have a fresh look on the book you are analyzing. The professors in college, they said, I don't want to hear anything that has already been written about the books you're analyzing. We want your fresh look. So I always start the book with no information about it. Okay. And all the information I had were from meetings in Bloomsday that I participated in. I think I've participated in 3 or 4 my whole life. And they're awesome here in, I live in São Paulo in Brazil. And the meetings that we had on Bloomsday were just amazing, with important scholars and also actors' performances and music. A bagpipe band playing at the end of it was just amazing. So that was all the information I had about Ulysses, and I only read Homer's book afterwards. Okay. So I think that for me, one of the nicest conversations were on Bloomsday with the people who studied the book, and then we could ask questions, and I think they were maybe the most enlightened. But last week we were talking about this chapter, and it's in my opinion, it's a very Freudian chapter. You have a lot of relationship between the father figure of Bloom and Stephen Dedalus being the son. And they're both, I think they are counterparts. And what is very Freudian, and I mentioned to the girls, and I said, this is so typical of men, especially men, in a sexist country like Brazil. We can see men acting like that when the two pee together. And there is a description of the arch of the pea, and so it was three ladies, and we are all in our 60s, and we had a great laugh talking about how masculine that talk was, and masculine in the most Freudian and primitive way that could be, because it's something that women don't do,
No.
like, oh, my breasts are bigger than yours, right? This is something we don't start comparing when we go to the bathroom, At least not the women I know, maybe
No,
other
me
women
either.
do. But it is so funny, the description of the urine for both men, and his was longer, and it was and we had a great laugh. So I'm sorry, but this is not very, very scholarly, but this
No,
this was a memorable conversation we had about the book. I'm sorry.
no.
Brazilians are infamous sometimes in a very bad way, because people think that we think about sex all the time. We don't. We have a lot to worry about. But this conversation between the two men had a very masculine connotation, comparing power that is very important to men, right? Which is something that women don't usually do. And it's right before the last chapter, when we have the most female chapter of all, right? Which is just the woman's voice, Molly's voice is just, I think that chapter is remarkable, right? So it's so contrasting when you think of two men, two grown-up men, two educated men comparing their pee, and then you have the woman saying all those wonderful things she says about being a woman and being in a relationship with a man. I don't know if it was intentional, but to me it sounds very obvious. It's a huge contrast between male immaturity and female immaturity that is universal in this book. There is it's an Irish novel, but you can relate it. You can relate to it in so many levels, because it is so universal in so many levels. As I said, it's the journey of the ordinary man, the journey of the ordinary woman. And even though the voice of the narrator is usually masculine up to the last chapter, except for the last chapter, I relate to that, and I relate to that voice in many instances as a woman. So, and being a Brazilian as well, you can still find a lot in common, because it is so universal in terms of what is life. I think this is a big question, right? What is life anyway, right?
Really interesting, all the different ways that you describe Ulysses. It's an Irish novel, but it's also universal, and it's also this journey of the common man, as you say, the ordinary man. That's just so fantastic.
Yeah, and I also call it the Bible of atheists. And it's nice to understand this, because I think Joyce was also a Catholic, right? And there are many, many references to the Bible, which I read, and also the rituals of the Catholic Church. So it's another way of identifying with the novel. I think that he decided to write the atheist novel. It's so full of images and things that we cannot explain, that we have to have round tables to discuss weekly on the Shabbat, on Saturday. We sit down and we read this novel, trying to decode all the hidden messages and the metaphors, and never being able to get to the original thought that generated them. And I think this is just impossible, either because Joyce didn't mean for us to understand it. And I think I read that once he said, this book is like life. In life, we don't understand everything. And so there are some passages that are, he said, they are not supposed to be understood, because this is like life. And I think that, yeah, this is the atheists' Bible, right? That we gather around and we study and we discuss with people all over the world. right? But this is a very personal point of view. So
no, I think it very interesting because like I was raised Catholic as well. And then a couple of years ago, I was like, no, like I'm pretty sure that's wrong. And actually it was like around the time when I was like first reading Ulysses too. But now I've realized, no, I'm like Catholic again now. I'm like, oh yes, that's like right in my life. But there's very much a through line I find, like where like how I've related to Joyce through that like Catholicism and atheism, and like a lot of people that I've talked to have this similar experience, not necessarily like regardless of what their beliefs are, but like there is something very like religious and like spiritual about the ways that we study Ulysses and about the way that we come together to talk about it, that I really like. I think a lot of us think that it's this very personal thing, but the more people that I talk to, I'm like, everyone does this.
Same feeling, but there's something religious about it, right? It's reading and rereading. It's just like you do with the Bible. Getting together to discuss it. It's just like with the Bible.
Has there been any other sort of like social event or these sort of, you know, like where they're involved with Joyce, but not necessarily so much with the text? Like, I don't know if you have any other experiences like that.
No, because not that I haven't tried to, but it's really hard to find people who want to discuss and gather for this kind of thing. It's and I live in a city, if you consider the what we call the Great São Paulo area. It's like 18 million people.
Wow.
Just my city, just the what we call the city of São Paulo itself, it's like 12 million people. And we have some of the best universities of the country here. But no, it's unfortunately, it's not common. People I usually talk to are people who don't live here, and we don't have face-to-face meetings. We talk on the internet, basically. So I follow Facebook groups, and yeah, these are the contacts that I have. And this reading group on Saturday. The two other women who are around my age, they live in very distant states in the northeast of the country. And then there are the two Italian girls, Ilaria and another one. And there is PJ from Sweeney's, who is in Ireland. So it's impossible for me to meet face to face. But sure. I plan when the COVID pandemic is over. I hope that someday it's going to be over. I intend to go to Dublin for a Bloomsday. It's been my dream for quite a long time. So
that would be fantastic. I've talked to a lot of people who really want to go this summer because it's the 100th anniversary. So
yeah,
we might all have to meet in Dublin this June.
It would be so great. For me, it would be so great because in my case, it's very lonely. It's really lonely because it's awful when you love something, you have a passion for something, and you have none of your friends are interested, you know. Some of my students are, because I'm an English teacher. And although right now I'm just teaching language, I'm not teaching literature. Sometimes I talk to them about the book, and they are eager to hear about it. But it's not like talking to someone who has read the book or who is reading the book. You know that it's different, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And usually people have the wrong impression. I myself, I had the wrong impression about the book before I started reading it. People say that there is a lot of, I don't remember the word in English, I think scatology, when you describe Joyce describes the bodily functions, like going to the bathroom, blowing your nose, and in detail, right?
Yeah.
And I was not interested in the book because everybody who talked about it said, no, it's disgusting. It's all about things that you don't want to read. And it's not, it's just here and there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most of it is so deep and philosophical. I love the chapter in the library when Stephen discusses Shakespeare and Hamlet, because this is also a novel about Hamlet. If you compare the relationship between Bloom and Stephen and Hamlet and his mom and his uncle, you see a lot of similarities, a lot of parallels, and I just love that chapter. And it's a chapter not a lot of people talk about, and for me, I think it's the best, really. I really love the last one, but because it has the female's voice, and I related to that so much when I read it, and I commented with my nephew, and I said the last chapter is so amazing. You can hear a woman saying, he says things that I would have said.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't know how a man can write like that. And my nephew says, maybe he didn't. Maybe it was his wife who wrote it. So, I don't know about that. But I also read that Joyce was an eager listener. He listened a lot to his wife. And as he was a very clever person to capture the different voices of people and the voices in literature, the so many genres that he explores, I think that, yeah, he could have written that if he had actually listened to his wife. But that's another thing we don't know.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I think it's so, even though those sorts of theories are kind of, out there, and I don't, I wouldn't want to try to argue with anyone about it, but I think they're interesting to think about, how did this happen? Even if we'll never know, it's cool to consider.
Yeah.
I think it's cool how you said that you sort of had this wrong conception of Ulysses before you started reading it. Do you remember, because I can think of one for myself, but did you have a moment when it kind of clicked and you realized oh, this isn't, what I thought it was?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess it was at the very beginning of the book. They are in the Martello Tower, right? And there is the opening is one of those very good Hollywood movies that open with, I say, oh my gosh, what is this? This is not what I expected it to be, and it was the very beginning. My book is all scribbled with notes, and I had stickers because I want to be able to go back to the passages that most impressed me, and I was taking notes all the time. And again, the chapter in the library to me was mind-blowing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, how can they say this is a book about doing number 2 in the bathroom, right? This is not it. This is so wrong in so many ways. And discussions about life and death when they go to the funeral, when Stephen's dad goes to the funeral. There are some passages that I can't recall them now, but there were passages I had to stop to breathe because they were breathtaking. And I said, okay, I need a moment to take this in, right? And it also has one of the cleverest puns that unfortunately is lost in Portuguese, which is about Anne Hathaway when they are talking about Hamlet. And I think he says something like, while Shakespeare had a will, Anne Hathaway, right? Anne Hathaway. And it's okay, I think that there is a suggestion that she would maybe sleep around, just like Molly is about to do. I don't know. But it is one of the cleverest puns I've read, and I'm a big fan of puns. I play with words all the time in Portuguese and in English. And when I read that, and I said, okay, nobody can do better than this, writing a pun. It's impossible. And unfortunately, in Portuguese, I quickly got the Portuguese copy, but it's impossible to repeat it because of the sound of the name Hathaway, right? She had a way.
Have you read anything else by him, or do you intend on? I've talked to some people who intend on never reading Finnegan's Wake. I've learned.
Okay,
but.
I read a section of a chapter of Finnegan's Wake because an English teacher, he's a high school teacher, in one of the groups I follow on Facebook, he asked for volunteers at the beginning of the pandemic. He asked for volunteers to discuss the chapter with him because he had a lesson plan for his students, for his teenage students.
Wow.
To discuss Finnegan's Wake. And he wanted to test his lesson plan with us. And of course, I said, okay, me first. And I thought there were going to be dozens of people who were interested. And there was me and two other people, right, of course. And then it is so hard. It is so hard. It's almost impossible to read. It's almost impossible to read. And, but it was great. It was great. I read the chapter, I studied it, and then we had this wonderful conversation. I think that answering your question, the best conversation I've read about Joyce was not on Ulysses, it was on Finnegan's Wake in that Zoom meeting. And it was interesting because after the meeting, I continued thinking about the chapter and sending my insights to the teacher. And so I also saw this, I saw that maybe, and again, I found a lot of sexual connotations that had, I'm not the kind of person, okay? I think it's Joyce.
It's Joyce. It is Joyce for sure.
And the chapter starts with the big O on top of the page. And they talk about the river and the Liffey River, right, in Dublin, and how the river opens or goes in the direction of the ocean. And there was a discussion about that. And I said, come on, a big O is a metaphor in American English for orgasm. And then you see there is this, and it's about the moment there is a sexual encounter at a park. I don't remember exactly what it is. I read it 2 years ago. I don't remember. I never went back to the chapter. But I said, no, this big O is here for some reason apart from that, about the meaning of the river. And when you think of a river, the river flowing and blah, blah, blah. So I continued writing to the teacher, and I said, please apologize. Don't think I have a dirty mind, but I found this other innuendo that seems like something sexual, right? So it was a great conversation I had with those guys. It was scholars who have been studying Joyce for a life, and it was just amazing. I learned so much. I read on my own. I study on my own because I'm a private teacher, and I don't work in a school or anything. So I don't really have a community to discuss that with, And a good friend of mine, I could talk about these things to. He died in the pandemic. So now there's nobody. So when Eladia mentioned you, I said, yes, me. And you were writing, it's a paper that you're writing
Well, it's not so much it's a public scholarship project. So rather than, writing a paper or anything like that, I think if everyone's okay with it, I've kind of just been posting like episodes on YouTube of like our conversations. And I think it's
Ah,
kind of, yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to maybe like, realize like how often people talk about Joyce, but we're just not, noting it down. And then I think
mhm,
also maybe like showing that like this community does exist, and
mhm,
like hopefully it'll be, sort of like if people don't know about the Sweeney's reading group, or if people don't know about these like places on Facebook or other projects that people have mentioned, maybe it'll be a little place where people can just be like, oh, people are talking about Joyce, and then a little, entrance
mhm.
into having their own conversations about
Uh-huh,
Joyce. But
uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, we have a good translator of Joyce who wrote this. I think this is the third translation that we have.
Okay.
And this is by um, Galindo. His first name is Caetano Galindo. And he, during the pandemic, the beginning of the quarantine, he taught a free course on Ulysses. But I could only watch one or two classes, and but it was the beginning, and the information for me was very basic because I wanted to go deep into the novel, because I already knew the basic information because of other classes I had watched and things that I had read. And then in the end, I gave it up. It seems that now the same translator is going to teach another free course
Okay.
for for the 100th anniversary. So there's going to be a free course now. And it's interesting when he talks about the book, because it took him 10 years to translate the book. And I think that Joyce spent 6 years or 7 years writing it.
Oh my
So
goodness.
10 years to translate, I think it was quite an accomplishment.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a lot of patience and
Yeah,
dedication.
yes,
Wow.
yes.
Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
especially because some passages are so hard to understand, and you need the input of other people. And also the inversions, English, English, the sequence of the sentence in English is from, I call it from left to right. In Portuguese, it's more from um, right to left. It doesn't make much sense, but we need to have inversions. For example, when I say from left to right, the adjectives in English come to the left of the noun. And in Portuguese, usually the adjectives come to the right of the noun, unless you want to give it a more abstract connotation. And then you pull the adjective to the left of the noun, and then it becomes more metaphorical than the literal meaning when the adjective comes to the right of the noun. So, for example, I was trying to follow a discussion with Ilaria and their Italian group, and my Italian is very, very basic. It's just a survival Italian, but I could understand what they were saying, and I tried to follow in Italian reading in English, and it was very hard. And I said, no, I have to read in Portuguese, because Italian and Portuguese have more or less the same sentence structure. And then reading in Portuguese, while they were reading in Italian and I was reading in Portuguese, I didn't get so lost, because when you listen in Italian or Portuguese and you read in English, you have to keep going back and forth in the sentence, It's crazy. It's a crazy thing. Listening to Italian and reading in English, it is a crazy exercise to do. It's a mental exercise that is hard.
Oh yes, that sounds very tense, but it's fantastic. Sounds
It
great.
is fantastic. You see why I don't find anybody to talk to.
No, but I think that that's so cool. I don't know.
Yeah. It is cool. I think it's great, right? That, okay, I'm listening in Italian, which is a language that I don't understand very much. I'm listening to Italian and reading in English, and I can understand almost 100% of it, right? And then listening to them discussing in Italian about the passage, because the Italian group, everybody speaks Italian. So they discuss it, and Ilaria knows a lot about the book because she studied it in college, so or for her master's, I think. So it was just great. The book has so many levels that there are so many ways of reading the book that one of the Bloomsday celebrations I went to was 2014.
Okay.
I was recently divorced. Bloomsday in Brazil, you know that Brazil, we call ourselves the soccer country, right? People here are crazy about soccer, just crazy about soccer. Okay. And there was, Brazil was playing another team. At the time, I think it was the opening of the 2014 World Soccer Cup. And the streets were empty because everybody was at home waiting for the game to start. And I was going to Bloomsday, and one of the sponsors was the whiskey that is mentioned, the whiskey brand that is mentioned, Jameson.
Okay.
So we could drink whiskey during the readings and the discussions. And I thought, okay, this is what I call a party. Forget about soccer.
Oh, lovely. That's so good.
So you see, as I said, this is my personal journey, right? I just didn't, it was not just reading the book. I have a journey with this book. Right, it's it has become my life companion. I think that your idea of posting videos about it, people talking about it, I think it's very innovative, because usually what we have is scholarly articles that are very long and hard, and if you haven't read the book, they are hard to understand. But if people listen to people talking so excitedly about it and saying that there is so much sex in the story, maybe more people are gonna get interested in reading. I think it's a fantastic idea. I just want to see. I just want to wait to see it come true. You know, as a project, I would like to follow up on that and see how it goes. And I think that this is very adequate for this age we are living of images and videos. People usually don't read very much any longer. People don't like to read. They like to watch videos. So I myself, I prefer to read. If I have to learn something, I prefer to read rather than watch a video about it. Sure. But I know that a lot of people in the new generations, and not so young people, they like to watch videos, and this can be very instructional because it's not so pedagogical. I think it's more entertaining. So what you are doing is something entertaining about one of the most difficult books that have ever been written.